We have a microphone. If anybody wants to ask a question, then I think somebody with a microphone is standing around. Do we have any hands? Anybody interested? Okay, we have a question here in the front. Okay, there we are.
Hi, thank you so much. This was very interesting. Jason, I have a question for you. There's a discussion now generally on screen time for children. So how do you see this in the context of Mightier and the games actually helping children versus a lot of time spent on screens?
No, that's a great question. Thank you. Screen time is an interesting challenge for every parent who's out there and trying to help their children. I think, though, that when you start thinking about screen time, you've already made the acknowledgement that screens can somehow change the behavior of children. Like, you've already made that acknowledgement. And so at that point, then we as the people who are making these interventions we just make a decision. Do we want that behavior change to be for good or for some other purpose? And for us, the goal has always been, look, how do you then take the screen time and turn it into something positive? How do you take that thing? If we all agree that screens can have that behavior change, how do we turn that time into something positive?
Any further questions? No, not right now. Well, think of a question. Well, we have one at the back. Sorry.
Hello, thank you. I'm from Dubai Future Foundation. I have a question for our guest speaker, Emmaneul. Because last year, I think many people call it the e-commerce first year in the MENA region. As we see, the e-commerce is really booming. Because I'm from China, we see the brands like Johnson & Johnson, they have cooperated with the e-commerce giant in China, like Alibaba in Shanghai, built this many research center who can speed up the R&D cycle to get more local products targeted at the local market. I'm not so sure. How do you think this will become another example in the MENA region in the near future? How far are we from that? Thank you.
Thank you. If I get a question correctly, how does pharma partner with a local company to scale? Is that?
Basically, my question is how do you see in the near future you can do more R&D, core R&D work with the local e-commerce giants to get more local target products for MENA market?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you. I think one of the biggest frustrations, for example, in the work of the industry is the idea of, we talked about this earlier, about scaling, right? It's about how you scale. I think we look at things from a very closed and focused bucket. I think it becomes a challenge. I think what happens with technology especially is we get to break down these barriers, right? And you get to democratize healthcare. And you realize that every region has a specific problem that's unique to that particular market. And how you get into that market, you need to partner with local partners, right? I know there's a lot of innovation centers, like here in the Middle East, right, or in North Africa, for example, right? Like look at the whole MENA region, or in China, or in Africa. And the example I used in my talk, for example, talking about Butterfly Network, right, or Babylon Healthcare, which is also based out of Rwanda. I think you see a lot more of those kind of partnerships to scale. So you see a lot of there's a lot of interest in what happens globally and in the different hubs and what are the local partners. And so you see a lot of that happening. I think it will be the future.
I have a question that is actually for all three of you. So Emmanuel just now mentioned democratizing healthcare. And I think in a sense, all of the technologies that you're talking about are meant to be democratizing healthcare, increasing access to mental health services, for instance, making healthcare more applicable to individuals rather than to a select population that is the one that always gets tested in clinical trials and so on. But for any of those things, the access to that healthcare still depends on having access to the technology. So having a tablet. Being in a country where it's possible to do that kind of testing of different and evaluation of different healthcare sites, having the devices that allow you to track your blood sugar or other health monitors. So is there the risk of an inequity appearing where the people who don't have access to even that basic technology are left out of these healthcare improvements?
It's sad to say it, but that's what exactly is going to happen, right? Because if you get to, and this is beyond, that's even beyond that. That's a reality of some of the ethical things that we need to discuss what technology brings, right? People get separated from things. Look from a basic example from the insurance piece. If you are at high risk, I talked about doing the genomic sequencing, right? So imagine if you do your genomic sequencing, you find out that you're at high risk for having cancer or you're high risk for having diabetes, and you are the insurance company, right? And you have to price premiums on particular people. Yes, there'll be discrimination on that. That's one. Two, you are seeing insurance companies today giving out devices to people, right? And based on how active you are, you get a discount. The same thing works with car insurance, right? When people track with car insurance and they say, hey, if I could track your driving skills, you get a discount. I see a future where if we don't watch things carefully, there'll definitely be a class divide, where those that provide data sets and they get to know you more will be those that will function in society. Those that cannot afford to be in will completely be pushed out of society, right? It's the reality of where we're going. So I think those are things that we need to address.
So what are government policies that can prevent that kind of discrimination?
It depends if you live in a capitalistic world, right? So, so we have policies of not discriminating based on pre-specified conditions, right? But we know it's not real. So if anyone believes in the illusion of privacy, I mean, it is an illusion, right? Because imagine if you think your insurance company doesn't know about you. I mean, every blood test you do, your insurance company pays for it. They know exactly what they're paying for. They give the results back. They know exactly what makes you sick. So they know that. I mean, it's not public knowledge, but they know exactly what happens to you in the back end. So they could. I think it's happening today, right, with discrimination. So I don't think these privacy policies are affecting it.
Yeah, and Emmaneul has a good point on the payers, on the insurance, especially given value-based healthcare. It's to their best interest to democratize the technology, to prevent disease, to prevent people from actually going to the hospital in order to receive healthcare, because that's the expensive part. But to your point of technology, there's always a way around it. For example, I know clinical trials where they completely bypassed the internet and the requirement to have Wi-Fi and went to mobile. Mobile is cheap. Everybody has a mobile in their pockets, and you can run a clinical trial just with mobile solutions, and that democratizing clinical trials very, very easily and very cheaply. So there's always, I think, a way around it as long as we're creative and we think about value-based healthcare.
Jason, you're nodding. You want to add something?
I mean, I think from the building interventions point of view, you have to. There is a piece where you have to just know who you're building for, and I think that, the idea no matter where you are, there are some technologies that are there and you can use to reach an entire population. I think that no matter what, you're going to find those technologies. I think that, you asked from the policy point of view, like how do we help? And I think that, my perspective is very mental health based, but I think that mental health diseases tend to require a very long view of the patient. And that is something, at least in the US system, that is very hard to get a payer to do. And if there are ways that we can encourage people to take those longer views, then I think we'll be in better shape, at least in the mental health space.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir, over here. Mike's coming. Yes.
Thank you. This question to Emmaneul. My name is Mohammed Hamdan from Harriet-Watt University. I'm interested in well-being management, and we had a student working on something similar but from a different dimension. We are used to do what we call qualitative analysis. And what you are doing, I understood, is more data-driven quantitative analysis. So this would work for who can afford, for example, like sensors to wear and wearable sensors, and we can collect the data and we can understand their behavior and monitor their behavior and model the activity. In certain societies, we cannot do this. So you have to go and make interviews with the people to understand their lifestyle and the way they live, and from that you can deduce certain things about their health issues. To give you one simple example, like certain women, when they carry rice bags every day from here to there, from home to from the store, whatever, that's a very simple exercise. Is good on their lifestyle in the long run. Because a simple exercise as a cardiovascular exercise that is good for them. So when they looked at their why they are still doing well and in good health, they realized it because that simple exercise, which they do indirectly just to bring food to home. So these kind of things, you can't ask them to wear sensors, you can't get data-driven, you can't do quantitative approaches. The only thing is to go and interview them and understand what their life, what they're doing, and try to make your own assumptions. So my simple question is, what you're doing is mainly like data-driven, would work for certain societies, and for other societies, you have to do it in a different way, what we call qualitative analysis, based on observation and interviews to understand their lifestyle. Thank you.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm happy to hear about that research piece. You're right. I think a lot of the things that we'll talk about, like for the futuristic element of being predictive models, using sensors, is definitely for a different part of the world and a different part of the market. But I think I agree with you that I think that's why I believe in solutions being more regional, right? Regional and focused on particular areas and based on what the needs are. But I think the best way to collect data sets would be in a passive, objective manner, right? If you could collect data sets on people without necessarily having to intervene to collect data, that's the best way. When you ask someone a question, there's always bias towards that, right? The best way to mitigate bias is to passively collect data. And so if you look today, for example, the massive companies in healthcare research are companies like Apple, which brings in the bigger question of, if data is going to be the new oil, then should we not give our devices for free? Why do you have to pay for devices, if you think about it, right? If you think about, if you buy a computer, for example, you have TV, they sell you ads all the time. Why do you have to buy a TV for them to sell you ads on it, right? If we give out free devices like the Apple Watch or Fitbit to a much larger community, don't we have much bigger data sets, right? Are there different business models around it, or do you have to actually pay for the device? So those are different questions that we have to address, and how do we leverage these things?
Any other questions? I'm going to ask one more question, which is probably more for Kosmas, but so you're working in a very large company and you're trying to get the company as a whole to, I think, adopt these AI-related practices. Can you talk about some of the challenges that entails?
Sure. Good question. The new CEO, we have a new CEO since January 1st, and part of his corporate strategic plan, 1/5 of his corporate strategic plan, is winning the digital race. So right from the top, it has been recognized that winning the digital race, whatever that means, it's imperative, right? Because we'd rather be the disruptor than being disrupted. How to do it is not so clear, to be honest. So we're trying a lot of new stuff. We're trying a lot of partnerships. We're trying to see what works and what doesn't work. At the executive level, at their level, they need to see tangible impact on our pipeline. And that's where it's, and we had this conversation with Emmaneul before the session, that's where the critical step of adoption is. You need to go from piloting to showing tangible impact to a big part of the business. So it can be adapted generally, and then the investments will be greater and this and that. We're not there yet. We're still at piloting and figuring out how it works, but the executives want to see tangible impact. So we haven't solved that yet, the scale up.
Right, but they're breathing down your necks. Okay.
Another challenge, last thing, I think another challenge also is the return on investment.
Yeah,
right?
true.
When you look at this, if you look at the idea, if I have $10 million and I invest in a molecule, or I invest the same $10 million in a preventive measure, in pharma, and I've been in pharma for a long time, if you look at the returns on investment, everyone's chasing after the next blockbuster product, right? So in pharma, you're looking at products that make over $1 billion. So if I say I put in 10 million and I get 500 million, it doesn't make it, right? Because you talk about massively traded companies with massive market caps. So if you make $500 million profit, your stock price doesn't even move, right? So it's very different. And so, but the different piece here, that you have companies like Mightier, for example, or other startups, that are coming in, and then they depend on the key players like the payers or the pharma companies to disrupt them. That's not the right business model, right? It's like Airbnb going to Marriott to help disrupt them, kind of, right? So you have to keep pushing that direction, and I think it's different business models, and together we get there.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that, again, it's like, how do you, it gets back to that question of like, how do you include everyone, right? So it's like, from the pharma company, yes, it's like, and especially like even in the payer world, like it's hard to have that long vision of the child, of anyone. And so, you have this piece, and like, if it's going to make an immediate big impact, they see the value. If you're playing a longer game, then it's just going to require a different business model than what exists right now. And so we have to go invent that.
Right. All right. Well, we're out of time, but thank you very much, Emmanuel, Kosmas, and Jason. Please give them a round of applause. Go ahead.